Hi again. We're on page 166, Christianity and the Social Crisis. Walter Rauschenbusch is talking about asceticism. Now, marriage is the fundamental social relation. The family is the social cell. It is society in miniature. If this was the attitude of ascetic Christianity toward the most natural and most loving of all social institutions, what chance of proper treatment did the other social relations have? Of course, for the majority of men, and the common sense of nature was fortunately stronger than any ideal motives which religion could marshal to thwart nature. They continued to marry and to beget children and be happy. But with such views of the perfect Christian life, that is asceticism, it would be with a feeling either of actual sin or at least of falling short of the highest life. It is true that church in many ways took the family life under its special care. It made marriage a religious ceremony and declared it a sacrament. And yet marriage continued to be a second-best condition, and in that atmosphere a true Christianizing of even that simplest social relation was hardly possible. It was one of the greatest social services of the Reformation that it broke with the ascetic ideal so far as marriage was concerned, and ranked the married life as higher than the unmarried. The Catholic Church still theoretically views voluntary celibacy as the flower of virtue, but practically Catholics have shared with Protestants in the emancipation from the ascetic ideal, which was originally due to non-Christian influences, but which has so long been able to pose as almost the essence of Christian morality. The attractiveness of this present world reaches us mainly through two channels: the family and property. The family comprises the people who are dear to us, and property the things that are dear to us. That is, the things that are dear to us. Asceticism turned its vigor against both. If we are to be emancipated from the world, the hold of the property instinct must be broken. Under the pressure of the monastic movement, men left their property altogether and dedicated themselves to a life of poverty. The more absolute the poverty, the holier the monk or the order. For those who remained in their family and calling, the ideal was fundamentally the same. Let them at least limit their needs and give away the surplus saved. Under the stimulus of this ascetic distrust of property, very large amounts were set free for charity. In fact, the charitable activity of the Church was amazing. For sheer willingness to give, modern Christianity cannot match its beneficence with ascetic Christianity. But this giving was not essentially a social conflict with the moral evils of pauperism, but a religious conflict with the moral evil of the love of property. The aim was not primarily to lift the poor recipient to social health, but to discipline the soul of the giver. The Church Fathers of the 4th and 5th centuries condemned private property with such vigor that they have often been classed as communists. But they took this ground not because they saw how valuable for the moral life a fair diffusion of property would be, but because they feared the seductive charm of property. They never proposed a communistic production of more wealth, but only called on men to share what wealth they had. If all had obeyed them, the productive capital of society would have been turned in for consumption, and society would have eaten its own head off. The zeal for giving, evoked by ascetic self-discipline, was greatly reinforced by the desire to gain merit. Asceticism and the idea of religious merit are very closely connected. If the Christian who enjoys his family and property can be saved and get to heaven, the man who, for the love of God, strips himself of family and property surely must have something more than mere salvation. He would have a surplus with God, with which he could either pay up the debts contracted through former sins, or which he could turn over to the general treasure of merit on which the weak and sinful could bank. It was one of the most important contributions of Paul to spiritual religion that he denied utterly that man could earn merit with God, but threw him naked and humble on the mercy of God. When the capitalistic impulse tries to accumulate a cash balance in heaven and do business with the Lord on a debit and credit basis, commercialism poisons religion. The desire to discipline the soul and the desire to win merit united in making men give large amounts in charity, but they also vitiated the social effectiveness of the giving. The social effect was subsidiary. The giving was the main thing, not the help. Almsgiving was the best means of penitence, the most effective bath of the soul next to baptism, a means of holiness even stronger than prayer or fasting. The poor, through whom this virtue was acquired, were the treasure of the church, part of its equipment, a kind of gymnastic apparatus on which the givers increased their moral muscle. Hence begging was ennobled. It became a profession with its own class spirit. The mendicant orders almost glorified it. Since the effect produced by the alms was a secondary matter, men preferred to turn their alms over to the church to be used at its direction, or its discretion. Their part was done with the giving. There were many organizations to elicit gifts, but no systematic organization of charity for the purpose of abolishing pauperism. Of course, a great deal of good was done. Human kindness and good sense were never wholly paralyzed. The touch of brotherly love was warm in spite of all calculations of merit to be earned. But it is clear that the religion which elicited the charity at the same time thwarted it, and that under these religious conceptions a sane Christianization of social relations would never have been undertaken. As long as asceticism ruled in Christianity, the force of religion was exerted to lift men out of their social relations instead of bringing them into normal relations. It would seek to suppress the natural instincts instead of finding the right and happy channels for them. So I'll put a link into a video we did a couple of years back on the Jewish family. All of this smacks of the suppression of the Jewish roots of Christianity, the Old Testament roots of Christianity, which, by the way, not just was emphatic about the normalcy of family life and the bearing of children, but even gave the job of education to the parents. Something completely different than what developed in Christianity later and is still with us even in Protestant lands. So I'll put a link into that on the role of the family, that is the parents, in the education of their own children. There were no schools in Israel until very late in its history.